December has come to pass, and a new decade has been thrust upon the world, but this doesn't mean that the last month of the 2010s has been any less eventful. This, for the last time for 2019, is the news without the bullshit. The World Anti-Doping Agency has given Russia a 4-year ban from all global sport, which includes the 2020 Olympics and the 2022 World Cup finals. Individual Russian athletes, who are untouched by the scandal, will still be permitted to compete, but will be required to do so under a neutral flag. The ban comes after evidence that the Russian government had planted fake evidence and had deleted files to positive drug tests used to identify cheating athletes. President of the WADA stated the decision to be unanimous and that Russia was given every opportunity to operate legitimately. A resident expert within the Swag News team has suggested that the culture of collective Russian doping is simply a remnant of the Soviet Union, where communistic values dictated that performance-enhancing drugs were required to be distributed equally among all competitors. Meanwhile, Germany and Canada become the most recent countries to put a ban on pray the gay away bullshit, while at the same time, 80 towns in Poland declare themselves gay-free zones. Viewers who want to learn more can refer to the list of sources in the comments, or simply search for Polish towns that are gay and click on the first result. An annual report by the Civicus Monitor, which is a collaboration between civil rights groups across the globe, has released information on the access to the democratic freedom of 196 countries around the world. The report found that the percentage of the world's population living in a repressed democracy has doubled in the last year to 40%, and the amount of countries categorized as an open democracy, the highest rating, has decreased from 4% to only 3%. The most notable downgrade was that of Kangarooland, which was stripped of its title of having an open democracy and has now been classified as narrowed. Australia now joins the likes of South Africa, Argentina, and the United States as nations unable to qualify as true open democracies. The downgrade is attributed to police raids on media outlets, the persecution of whistleblowers, and unjustified pressure on peaceful protests. Countries who currently retain an open democracy include Uruguay, Canada, pretty much all of Northern Europe, and New Zealand. If Middle-earth is officially more free than 97% of the rest of the world, then by the grace of Gimli's penis, we have a long way to go. Viewers from last month will remember the decision by the United States to finally recognize the Armenian genocide, which saw the precursor to the Turkish government kill 1.5 million Armenians during World War I. The decision was received very negatively within the Turkish government, and since the announcement, the president of Turkey has threatened to officially recognize the genocide of Native Americans by the United States government in a reverse Uno-card power move. As much as it's such a fucking idiotic concept to have two powerful states threatening each other over well-documented historical facts, it would certainly be a good trend going into the new decade. If Australians will openly admit they lost a war to a bunch of fucking birds twice in a row, then we can probably collectively agree that there are plenty of events in the history of every single people on the planet that are far from making us swell with patriotic pride. In Kangarooland, the country has seen a month of even more catastrophic bushfires, and at one point, contained 14 of the top 15 hottest places on Earth. The national average maximum temperature on one day was 41 degrees Celsius, and in some parts of the country, the temperature was at 49.9 degrees, or 121.8, for those who are currently watching with a gun in their hand, and bald eagle perched on their shoulder. Despite the enormous volume of land already destroyed due to bushfires, and even more people perishing in an attempt to fight the flames, the Australian government has proven to be less adept than YouTube when it comes to its ability to manage its community. The government has been criticized globally for its pathetic action on climate change, and even being called out for using accounting loopholes to meet climate targets. The government has also come under fire for cutting back 3/4 of its fire management officers in the state most affected by the fires, and cutting bushfire prevention efforts by $121 million from National Parks and Wildlife Services. This has led to many of the fire management staff who had been made redundant by budget cuts, to be asked to risk their own lives to fight these fires without pay. But through all of this, the most entertaining part was Australia's own Prime Minister, Mr. Scott Morrison, who you might remember as the guy who told the nation that cricket would help communities decimated by bushfires feel better. This is a screenshot from the Cricket this month, which is in a suburb in the largest city in Western Australia. You can't even make this shit up. Media tried to question the Prime Minister on the catastrophic bushfires, but it was found that he was unable to answer questions due to being on holiday in Hawaii, a fact which was initially denied by the Australian government. This comes after he found himself stuck in a building earlier in the month due to bushfires and telling a 17-year-old climate rally leader to stay in school, who then went on to produce a near-perfect score in her high school exams. Mr. Morrison eventually declared a state of emergency within the country, but not before a Melbourne-based retailer raised $10,000 for bushfire relief by selling Scott Morrison-themed Hawaiian shirts. A recent report by an independent climate monitoring think tank ranked Australia in last place in terms of climate change policy out of the 57 countries evaluated. Another report funded by the SERSWAG news team internally has found the current climate policies to be scientifically retarded. Meanwhile, the Dalai Lama is still pissed off at China, US, and Russian troops get into a fist fight in Syria, and a man from Colorado Springs robs a bank, throws the money into the air before wishing everybody in the bank a Merry Christmas. The 67-year-old man then waited at a nearby Starbucks to be arrested, prompting many to speculate whether this may be a sort of retirement plan or last-ditch attempt to receive medical assistance. In Freedom Land, the House of Representatives has voted to impeach that guy from Home Alone 2, making him the third US president in history to be in this position. This series for the most part has avoided this long-running story up until this point, due to a lack of substance, its sheer complexity, and the fact that most people who watch this channel are probably here to avoid this kind of shit. Regardless, let's try to properly understand this clusterfuck. In July 2019, the US president had a phone call with the leader of Ukraine and allegedly asked him to launch an investigation into Joe Biden, a strong political rival for the upcoming 2020 election. Only 91 minutes after the call, it was found that $400 million in military aid to Ukraine had been frozen, which is at the very least highly suspicious. Obviously, blackmailing a foreign leader to investigate a rival within your own country is far from upstanding behavior for a United States president, and supporters of impeachment have accused the president of not cooperating with the investigation into the matter. In light of these events, the president has been charged with both abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, both of which were passed by the House of Representatives. The second and final step of impeachment is a vote by the US Senate, in which the president's fate will be decided by a jury of 100 senators, 67 of which will need to vote to convict the president, while any less will result in all charges being dropped. Should the president be found guilty, he will immediately be removed from office. Experts believe that the chances of the president being removed from office is extremely low, as he currently has a Republican majority in the Senate, and not a single Republican vote in the House of Representatives was on the side of impeachment. I've recently tried to expose myself to avid supporters of both sides of the US political spectrum, and it seems as if Republican supporters of the president see this whole ordeal as a personal attack on the president, after his critics were left with a bitter taste after the 2016 election, while Democratic supporters of the impeachment claim that presidents have been impeached for much less and will find the process to be successful out of principle, even without removal from office. Many would argue that the entire process of impeachment has shown many flaws in the system. The House of Representatives had a Democratic majority, and only 2 out of the 435 members voted against their affiliated parties, both of whom are expected to switch in the near future. With the impeachment also likely to be voted strictly on party lines in the Senate, it calls into question whether the impeachment has anything to do with unbiased justice, or if simply every member of both parties are just siding with their own team. Many critics also argue that this process will result in an even more politically divided nation, with a strongly ingrained two-party system that the initial American founding fathers, in part, established the country to be free from. As always, viewers are free to make up their own mind. At the same time, Nestle was told by a Michigan court to fuck off with their water privatization bullshit. National Australian hero, Egg Boy, has raised enough money for 900 refugee children. The Indian government makes it easier for immigrants to become citizens, as long as they don't identify as Muslim. And a woman in Iowa tried to murder a teenager on the grounds that her skin was a different color. Isn't this just the face of someone likely to take a shit on a Walmart cash register? Greta Thunberg has been officially named Time Magazine's Person of the Year and the youngest person in history to ever receive the title. The 16-year-old from Sweden is credited with starting a climate change movement, which has now spread to 150 countries and millions of people across the world. Critics of Miss Thunberg argue that she is far from qualified to talk about climate change, and unlike many other activists, has failed to produce reasonable steps to combat the issue. There is also the argument that it is dangerous to make someone so young the figurehead of any political movement, as it opens up a dangerous precedent for minors to be potentially abused for political gain. Supporters of Miss Thunberg claim that she is simply a product of a world that refuses to take action, and that her only real goal is to bring attention to climate scientists who have been saying the same shit for decades. Greta has famously rejected awards and discarded pre-prepared speeches in favor of just handing lawmakers United Nations climate reports. But regardless of your personal stance on this seemingly divisive figure, the message remains no less important. It's an extremely dangerous position to even give two sides to this debate, when one side is composed of 99% of climate scientists fearing for their lives, and 1% of healthy skeptics. Humans can achieve undeniable and seemingly impossible things when the goal, or threat, is easy to comprehend. But it's so fucking scary to know that this, which may well be the biggest threat humanity has ever confronted, may go unchecked, because it simply doesn't have an evil face to punch. A genuine criticism, however, is despite Ms. Thunberg's enormous contribution, the overwhelming majority of voters elected the protesters of Hong Kong to be collectively named Person of the Year, a majority that the magazine decided to oppose in its decision. The protests themselves, which have now been raging for over 290 days, seem to simply be business as usual for the people of Hong Kong. 70 million in protest money has been frozen for bullshit charges. Citizens flood the streets in another impressive human rights rally, and a Danish member of parliament is kicked out for his support of the protesters. Activists of Hong Kong have also made an effort to boycott the upcoming Mulan movie from Disney and have called into question the decision for China to be the host of the 2022 Winter Olympics when it still maintains concentration camps that many have compared to the ones found in Nazi Germany, the existence of which has led to those speaking out to be dispersed with pepper spray. Even just looking at these fucking images, how the fuck could any director worth their salt not want to make a film about such clear-cut good and evil when it is unfolding day by day in front of our eyes? The Chinese government has proven to be a frightening source of unease throughout the world, from hundreds of Pakistani brides being sold to the Chinese mainland, a former Chinese infiltrator admitting that there are more spies in Australia now than during the Cold War, and more stories coming out of concentration camps from those who have managed to escape. A very notable recollection depicts a 29-year-old Muslim woman who was detained, electrocuted, experimented on, and whose oldest infant son was killed by a puncture in the neck. In technology, popular mobile app TikTok has come under scrutiny after a viral post criticizing China led to the user becoming banned, while a representative of the Chinese-owned and operated app has denied that this kind of criticism would lead to anyone becoming excluded from the platform. This can easily be dismissed as absolute bullshit. Later in the month, TikTok was proved to be censoring content from creators who were disabled, overweight, or showed indicators of being gay. The platform, which now enjoys over a billion users, has also been banned on all government-issued mobile devices in the United States for posing a security risk. How dare TikTok stand where Vine stood? Moving on, US presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has unveiled a proposed plan to expand broadband access across the country and ultimately offer faster and lower cost internet options than what is currently available. The plan would include $150 billion in grants, which would allow local governments to provide publicly owned broadband, which is designed to break away from the often extreme cases of price gouging that is seen in the monopolistic internet service industry. Viewers with an exceptional memory may remember this happening in Fort Collins earlier in the year, which was widely received by residents as a resounding success. Mr. Sanders went on to call the internet a human right and emphasized that it has become a necessity for both business and education. As someone who started building my entire livelihood using internet from a university dorm room, I find it hard to disagree. Meanwhile, Twitter removed 6,000 accounts for being part of a Saudi Arabian government propaganda campaign, and Russia successfully tests its own internal internet, which raises many concerns in terms of security, but also the insane dangers of having an internet completely censored by a global superpower, and its potential for information manipulation. In entertainment, December provided a huge amount of trailers for upcoming movies such as Free Guy, Black Widow, James Bond, No Time to Die, Tenet, and Ghostbusters. Meanwhile, Disney have produced 80% of the highest earning films of 2019. Netflix is leasing the iconic Paris Theatre in New York to screen its original movies, and The Witcher 3 sees a huge increase in the Steam charts after the success of the recently released Witcher Netflix series. The company behind the popular video game series have seen their stock price rise by 21,000% over the past decade, which to those unfamiliar to this area of study is what stockbrokers call absolutely unbelievably batshit insane. Speaking of being epic gamers, Microsoft has unveiled its upcoming console, the Xbox Series X, or SX, which is set to release in late 2020. The new design places the console as one of the largest in recent memory, with its fridge-like posture putting it at 15 cm wide and a whopping 46 cm tall. The Series X is said to be up to 4 times as powerful in certain metrics as the Xbox One X, and will boast day one backwards compatibility for Xbox games from previous generations. Potential buyers will likely have to wait until E3 to get any mention of how much SX will cost. Meanwhile, a Bioshock game is in development for next generation consoles. Star Citizen has raised $250 million in crowdfunding, and Titanfall 2 sees a huge PlayStation player count after being given away for free on PlayStation Plus. Lastly, the 2019 Game Awards came and went last month, with 80 media and influencer outlets voting on 29 categories in the video game landscape. Best Action Game was awarded to Devil May Cry 5, Best Art Direction was presented to Control, and Best Community Support was given to Destiny 2. Meanwhile, Apex Legends was crowned Best Multiplayer Game, Disco Elysium won Best Narrative, Fortnite was given Best Ongoing Title, and Greatest Performance was awarded to Mads Mikkelsen for his role in Death Stranding. In terms of esports, Best Team was given to G2, Best Player was awarded to Fortnite player Bua, and Best Esports Game was presented to League of Legends. Finally, the nominees of Game of the Year included Control, Death Stranding, Resident Evil 2, Super Smash Bros., Sekiro, and The Outer Worlds. In the end, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice was crowned the best game of 2019. This has been the news for December, and by extension, the news for 2019. When I began this series at the start of the year, I did so with an intention to make the news faster, easier to understand, and more digestible than what was currently on offer. I expected the series to be easy to make, grow, monetize, and sponsor, but little did I know that I would be proved wrong on all of these factors. Several months ago, I was certain that news without the bullshit would be forced to end, but through the incredible support of so many of you over the last few months, we now get the luxury to continue into the new year. To be entirely honest, the kind of support the series has received has been frankly overwhelming, but it has just fueled an ambitious vision of what it could become, should its support be allowed to grow into the future. I don't want to go into these in detail for fear of overpromising and underdelivering, but I'll say that I can identify a huge gap between what these videos are currently and what they could develop into. I'd like to wish every single viewer an optimistic 2020, and I hope I can continue to make videos that you can appreciate and enjoy.